One of the most amazing things about humans is our ability to think about and plan for the future. But we're not always that good at it. Just ask betting companies, right? There's a reason why they exist. Now, I think one of the areas we see this is on our wedding days. We swear this is going to be forever, but 40% of us get divorced. What's more, we don't learn from this. So second marriage is 60% divorce. Third marriage is 70% divorce. Just ask Elizabeth Taylor's 7th ex-husband. But there are things you can do about this. So when I proposed to my wife on a sunset picnic overlooking our favourite beach, shortly afterwards I said to her, why don't we get a relationship counselling session every year? I figured that if you get your car serviced, why not get your relationship serviced? So we've just done our 3rd service and so far no breakdowns. Now, one of the problems with thinking about the future is called the planning fallacy, and this is where we underestimate the time, money and effort required to complete a project. Sydney Opera House, classic example, 10 years late, 14 times over budget, and the architect walked out never to be seen again. Right? So we're also quite overconfident in our predictions. So a guy called Tetlock asked a bunch of experts to predict like election results and sports matches, and he found that even the confident predictions of these experts were no better than flipping a coin, basically. So not only are we overconfident, we also don't learn from our previous prediction errors, and this becomes a bit of a problem. And a psychologist called Dan Gilbert did a fascinating study where he asked people, how much have your preferences changed over the last 10 years? And people said, yeah, quite a lot, like I used to like Motorhead and now I listen to Mozart. And but then he asked them, how much do you think you'll change in the next 10 years? And across every age group, they said, no, not much at all. No, not much at all. So we can see that in the past we changed, but our predictions about the future are poor. And you think that you're the final version of you and you're not going to change. But I've got news for you, you're actually not done yet. There's plenty for you to learn. And in fact, you're more like a work in progress. So the people standing before me today, you are a work in progress version of you. And I think what's important about that is you've got to appreciate that in 10 years' time, on the 16th of July 2024, it's more likely than you'd care to admit that you'll actually be sitting at home with a cup of cocoa, nodding along in agreement to Alan Jones, right? So this is the reality, I'm sorry. And so the reason this is important to me is that my business is, I have a purpose to help the world make better decisions. I train people around decision making. And that incorporates, a lot of it is thinking about the future and making good decisions about that. And so I want to show you some solutions. First of all, my name is actually, by the way, Robin, not Rob. And I hate my name, particularly because it gets confused with a girl's name. So this is a letter from Tony Abbott that sent last month to me, to Mrs. Robin Pyne, right? So when we were naming my daughter, I wanted a name that not just we'd like, but that she'd like when she grew up. And I found a website which has asked thousands of adults whether they like their name. And what we did is we got a top 5 from just our subjective feelings and then used this outside view, this objective data, to pick Emma's name. And the great result out of that is that I know that 87% of Emma's like their name, compared to only 56% of Robin's. Thank you, Mum. So this outside view, this objective data is really powerful and really easy to get hold of, okay, as well. So that's the outside view. Now, when I launched my business, I also use a technique called base rates, which is about saying, how do you manage risk? I'm going to go and talk to businesses like mine and establish some of the key numbers. For example, I learned from talking to these people that in a training business, it can take up to a year from having a coffee with someone for them to actually book in something. On the positive side, it only takes 17 days on average for them to pay. So these are really important base rates that are very useful in predicting the future. Also, when I launched my business, I did a technique called the pre-mortem. And this is where you imagine that your business has died and it's a year's time. And you look back and you fill in the gaps in that story about why it might have died, right? And our brains are amazing at filling in gaps in stories. So my mentors and I that sat around and did this, we actually surfaced some risks. Like, okay, your business might have died because you got sick. And I was like, I hadn't thought of that. What do I do about that? So you can offset these risks. And the pre-mortem technique surfaces 30% more risks than just looking at a business plan on its own. So really powerful techniques. But these 3 techniques, I think the reason they're important is relative to all of us, is that if you think about why we die, sometimes it's due to the decisions we make. In 1900, 5% of the reasons why people died were kind of in their control, like smoking, driving, eating, doing the wrong things. By 2000, our life expectancy, way higher, but 50% of the reasons we die are kind of our short-sighted decisions about smoking, right? And if there's one person who I think makes short-sighted decisions, it's this guy, my pen pal, Tony. Not only short-sighted, but also doesn't take into account the outside view and thinks facts are just incidental to decision-making, right? So So, Mrs. Tonya Abbott, come and have a coaching session with me, and I will tell you how to think about the future and make good decisions, not just for you, but for all Australians, including those who don't own mining companies. Yours sincerely, Rob Pyne.